Okay, good day everybody, and welcome to today's episode. We're going to talk about a topic which I think is quite interesting to many, which is how to rent out your HDB in Singapore and retire in Johor Bahru, right? And so again, I repeat, rent out your HDB in Singapore to retire in Johor Bahru. So this is a concept which is not new. Actually, many people in Singapore have been doing it already. I'm sure you have heard of it before at some point or the other, but don't know whether you have actually seriously considered it. So how it works is that this typically applies to people who are in Singapore residents. Normally, they're age 50 and above, nearing retirement age or already retired. And these guys, or this category of people, typically already have a HDB that is fully paid off, right? And that's because they bought the HDB at the time. The HDB would have been very cheap when they BTO at the time, maybe 20, 30,000, $100,000. And over the years, they have paid off this HDB. So this HDB is a sitting asset for them. Typically, the HDB may not have a very long lease left, could be 60 years, 50-year lease HDB. But generally speaking, this HDB is free of encumbrance, right? No loan, right? And they can rent out this HDB and get the full 100% cash flow out of that HDB. It's not necessarily HDB either. In some cases, it's also a condo. They could have done the property investment phase in those days. And of course, those days, 10, 20 years ago, when they buy properties a lot cheaper, and they may have done the asset progression thing a couple of times, so made money a few times over from selling, buying, selling, buying. So in this case, they may even have multiple properties, one fully paid off HDB or a fully paid off condo, also possible. They could have multiple properties, one in their own name, one in their wife's name, right? Or even each spouse also could have multiple properties, right? It's not unusual, right? Especially for Singaporeans or Singapore PR or people who lived in Singapore since for a long, long time, past 20, 30 years, to be in such a scenario because, of course, those days, like I said, property was much cheaper. And in today's property prices, definitely they're sitting a lot of appreciation, capital gain on this real estate. So how does it work to do this, right? So let's we use a most basic scenario, right? You only have one HDB, which is fully paid off, and you're living in today, right? This is the most basic scenario. Of course, there are people who have more than this, but let's use this most basic scenario. So the idea is you rent out this HDB and earn the rental income there, and this could be $3,000, $4,000 a month, right? Generally speaking, on location where your HDB is today, and they take this money, they go to live in JB, and you times the exchange rate today 3.4, right? And they can live a very comfortable lifestyle of retirement in Johor Bahru, plus whatever other supplementary retirement income they may have. They could have some money in shares. They could still have some CPF monies. So all these things included, right? They can actually live in Johor Bahru very, very comfortably. And why Johor Bahru? Of course, Johor Bahru is near to Singapore, right? That's the thing. So and so it's easy to come back to Singapore, right? And you don't totally abandon your family and your friends and your community in Singapore. So this is the reason why this is a very popular lifestyle, very popular option, especially if you're a retiree or nearing retirement age. And if you are in that category, you should seriously consider what I'm about to share with you and watch this video until the end. So question number one is how much can you rent out your HDB or your condo in Singapore today? So let's pull up some prices from Property Guru, right? And you can see here that a typical HDB, right? We are talking about a three-room flat, right? In Singapore, generally look at the average or median rental prices, right? They are generally 2,000, high 2,000s and above, right? You can see a lot of 2008, 2005. In some cases, also nearer to 3,000, like in Marine Parade. Punggol also 3,000, Queenstown also 3,000. So the more prime locations, three-room flat in Singapore, right? You can rent for high twos to maybe low threes, right? In Singapore, right? And this is actually median, right? So if you have a nicer three-room flat, of course you can get a better rate than this. And in four-room flat, generally you can see all four-room flat across Singapore, all 3,000 and above, right? If you got super prime four-room flat, you can get nearer to 4,000 even, right? So four-room flat, 3,000 over dollars and above, nearing to 4,000 also possible. And you got five-room flat, definitely this is also high as well. So if you're looking at condos, these numbers will even be more, right? If you got a one bedroom condo today, anywhere $3,000 on average, easily, right, to up to $4,000, right? If you have a three-room condo or four-bedroom condo, easily you can hit to the 4, 5, 6,000, $7,000 range, also possible, depending, right, on where your condo is in Singapore. So if you take that into comparison, so you say from $3,000 a Sing, right, all the way to $5,000 Sing, right, you convert that at today's exchange rate, right, you're talking about easily 10,000 ringgit per month to live in JB. Now, 10,000 ringgit per month, right, that's a lot of money, right, considering you have no obligations left and you are a retiree, right, and we'll discuss that a bit more about Is this amount enough to live in JB? So the next question is, how much is enough for you to live and retire in Malaysia? Now I'm going to use a number which is 3,000 ringgit per month per person. 3,000 ringgit per month per person. Yeah. So it's, if you use that, it's actually 100 ringgit a day. If you live a very average lifestyle, you eat normal food, cook at home, maybe occasionally eat out, even eat out every day also can. I think 100 ringgit per month, right? And you will find that 100 ringgit per month per person is more than enough. Of course, this number 3,000 ringgit per month is excluding housing expenses, excluding rent, right, or housing costs, right? So and actually 100 ringgit per day, I think in fact you can have a beer every day or at the pub also, no problem, right? Unless you're talking about you're going partying every day, then maybe 100 ringgit per day not enough. Club and party every day, but you're retiree, right? So you shouldn't be clubbing or partying every day. But 100 ringgit per day per person for a retiree, I think is definitely more than enough. In fact, if you want to be frugal, even 50 ringgit per month also I think is more than enough, right? Yeah, but let's use a number here, right, which is, I think, let's cater in for some splurging, right, for some enjoy some nice things in life. So 100 ringgit per day per person, I think, is quite a lot, right? And if you think about it, so it's 3,000 ringgit per month, which is only 1,000 Sing dollars, right? In fact, less than 1,000 Sing dollars, right, at today's exchange rate. So if you can rent out your HDB for 2,000, $3,000, right, you have more than enough money actually to live in Malaysia, live comfortably, in fact, right? And if you say couple, right, so you times two, you and your spouse, right, still more than enough money to live in Malaysia very comfortably, right? And of course, here I'm going to show you a chart, right? You can look at this website, which I'm going to link here below, where it compares the cost of living in Malaysia versus Singapore. Of course, Singapore generally more expensive, and you can look here some parameters, right? And in fact, if you look at many cost of living comparison websites, you can see very clearly Malaysia in general is cheaper than Singapore and cheaper by a fair bit. Yeah, but of course, if you want to find out more from my perspective, do take a look at my other videos as mentioned earlier, where I talk about 10 things to buy in Malaysia which are cheaper versus Singapore. Why Johor Bahru anyway? Now, the reason why I tell people to retire in Johor Bahru rather than say Penang or KL is primarily because of distance. Because sometimes when you talk about retirement, right, people are not ready to leave their family behind, leave their friends behind. So if you still have friends in Singapore, family in Singapore, especially if you've got children, grandchildren, right, you still want to go for your salsa dancing at your CC every Saturday or Monday, then it's very difficult to like say, oh, I want to go stay in KL, I want to go stay in Penang, I want to go stay in Thailand, right? It's difficult to do that. It's socially, all these connections is not something that you can replace easily, or you may even want to replace. You want to still be connected to them. So if you stay in JB, at least this is still nearby. Right? When we say retirement, you're still retiring in Singapore somewhat because JB is still quite near to Singapore. And furthermore, in 3 years' time, you may not have retired yet. You could still be retiring in years to come. In 3 years' time, you got MRT coming to JB, right? If you watch my other videos, the MRT is being built in Woodlands, linking to JB right now. So when you have MRT to JB next time, go back to Singapore. It's a lot easier. Like right now, if you want to travel JB Singapore, it's still quite troublesome in a sense, public transport, because of the traffic jam is still very heavy. A lot of cross-border traffic still. But next time when got MRT, this will be a lot easier, right? And living in Singapore is still, going back to Singapore to meet your Singapore friends and family still is okay. Which is the reason why I say Johor Bahru is like another district in Singapore, right? Singapore got 28 districts, so Johor Bahru is like district 29, right? So it's like a extension of Singapore in a sense, right? So this is why I say retirement in JB is a good option, especially for those of you who are going to retire soon and want to stretch your retirement dollar. Of course, the other most important question is, do you have residency rights in Johor or in Malaysia, right? How long can you live in Johor Bahru or Malaysia, right? Legally, right? So by right, the most correct way to do this is to apply for Malaysia My Second Home, the MM2H program. You may have heard of this. The MM2H program is there today, but unfortunately, the MM2H program, actually, in my opinion, right now, is quite difficult to get into, right? There are a lot of requirements. I will not go into detail, which are very complicated. A lot of people don't qualify, and I think it's quite difficult to get, actually, to be honest speaking. But right now, the Malaysian government is looking at revising the MM2H requirements to make it easier. Now, we don't know when this will happen. We know that it's in discussion. The minister has already said it. So let's wait out for the new MM2H requirements. And once that's out, we can have another video to talk about it. But the correct way by right is to get an MM2H visa, because MM2H will grant you a minimum 5-year residency visa. You can live in Malaysia for up to 5 years straight. But what a lot of people do today actually is they do have something, we do have an existing tourist visa, which is a 30-day visa, right, for ASEAN countries. So this includes Singapore and Malaysia. So you can go to Malaysia for up to 30 days if you are a Singaporean, right? And if you go up to Malaysia up to 30 days, you can sort of spend up to 30 days in Malaysia before you have to go back to Singapore to chop your passport. So today, actually, a lot of people are doing this. They are using the 30-day visa to in out of JB and Singapore. But of course, I have also heard comments and some people have feedback to me that actually nowadays Malaysia immigration is more strict on this. If they decide that you are living in Malaysia far longer than you're living in Singapore, they may question you, they may U-turn you, right? I have not seen it personally myself. Of course, I hear these all third-party stories to me. So I think the scenario in this case, if you're using a 30-day visa, you have to be careful of this position, right? That it may happen to you if you do spend proportionally a lot more time in Malaysia versus Singapore, which again I believe doesn't apply to everyone because again, as I mentioned, one thing good about why you stay in JB anyways, because you still want to go back to Singapore. So a lot of people, if you do spend some time in Singapore, some time in JB, you have 50-50 or even 40-60 timing in Singapore, Malaysia. I think it's not a problem, right? A lot of people get passed through this simply because we don't live in JB 100% of the time, right? If you need to stay in JB 100% of the time, then definitely you need to explore Malaysia, my second home, or other visa options, right? We have also run into cases where Malaysian PR, they are Malaysian, right? They got Singapore PR, sorry, they are Malaysian but Singapore PR. So they lived in Singapore for 20-30 years, right? Of course, if this kind of people, like actually like myself, they get the best of both worlds, right? Because we have Singapore PR as well as still Malaysian citizens. So actually we can spend no fixed amount of time in any other country, right? These are the best case scenario. Because I met a customer last week who was also like this. He had a fully paid off condo in Singapore, right? He's actually a Malaysian but got Singapore PR, lived in Singapore, I think 30-40 years retired. He's practically Singaporean in all but name. So this guy, he want to rent out his Singapore condo and live in Malaysia. Then for him, of course, he got no visa or residency issue, right? Other options, there are also other visa options. If you watch my other video in this YouTube, go check it out, right? On other visa options, if you have what do you call it, you can check out what they can do. The other, which is quite interesting option today is if you have a long-term visit pass in Malaysia. Now, how to get a long-term visits pass is typically you must have a spouse who is Malaysian. Okay, so your Malaysian spouse apply a long-term visa pass for you, the Singaporean, right? So if you have a spouse who is Malaysian, right, or you have a direct family member who is still Malaysian, typically your parents, right, you can ask that parent to apply a long-term visit pass for you, right? I think that's a new option which is quite interesting because that day I saw one, right? Malaysian and Singaporean couple, right? So they were saying they will apply long-term visit pass for the Singaporean. I said, oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's possible, right? One way to reside in Malaysia legally, right? But otherwise, I think the 30-day visa works quite well, especially if you still spend a lot of time in Singapore. Okay, the next question is where should I live in Johor Bahru and should I rent or buy? Now, JB is a big place. Actually, there are many areas in JB to choose from. You can choose to live in Johor Bahru city centre itself, which I think most Singaporeans are familiar at least to some level. You can choose to live in the suburbs, places like Austin. You can Bukit Indah, Eco Botanic, Eco Springs, areas like this, Taman Sutra. These are some of the popular suburbs where are nice to live, right? There's no right or wrong. Again, it depends on your familiarity, right? If you're familiar with the area, then of course, you can choose to live there. Up to you. I mean, it's not really up to me to tell you where to stay, right? But I think you stay in areas that you are familiar, right? And one thing I still think why it makes sense to live in JB City Centre is because you want to be near to the MRT, you want to be near to immigration to go back to Singapore, right? That's my take on it, right? Um, you don't have to agree with me on this thing, right? Some people choose to live in places like Austin because they like Austin vibrancy. So okay, yeah, go ahead stay in Austin, right? Similarly, with what type of property, whether it's landed or condo, my preference actually today is actually condo. I know it may sound strange, right? But my preference today actually condo, which are easy to maintain, easy to manage. Because you must understand, at retirement age, you may not have a lot of energy or time, or even want to spend the energy on time to take care of a big house, right? I know landed sounds great, right? But unless you're prepared for landed living, lah, right, then you must understand there's, landed house is big, more maintenance work required. Sometimes we're not talking about money, we're just talking about time and effort, right? So of course, landed has its pros. You got big space, a lot of room, right? And if you got big family members or you expect family members to come or friends, then landed is nicer, better for entertaining and things like that, right? But landed tends to be further away, of course, bigger house, right? And yeah, this kind of concerns, right? And you cannot leave a landed there. If you want to lock up the landed and walk away for 3 months, right? Go for a holiday in Europe, you can't really do that because the landed will visibly wear and tear outside 3 months period. Condo is a lot easier to maintain, for that perspective. And condo also can be more convenient. You can buy condo with conveniences downstairs like food and supermarket, right? And better transportation, you know. So these are the reasons why I think condo is not bad also, especially if you're a retiree concern. Now, whether you should buy or rent is really up to you, right? If you're totally, like what I said earlier, not familiar with JB, you don't go to JB often or don't go to JB enough to make a decision on where to stay, then go and rent first, right? Go and rent 1 year, because contract in Malaysia typically can get for 1 year. You don't have to rent 2 years. Rent 1 year in a location that you want to try out. Decide whether this place is for you. If you don't like it, you can always, you know, after the rent, move to somewhere else, right? And see, you know, whether you enjoy or not the place. So rent first if you want, right? I think it's a good way to get introduced to JB. uh, and you can do 1 year rental contracts in Malaysia, right? And go and decide whether you like the area or not. If you already know what you want, know where you want to stay, then by all means you can also choose to buy, because how much is the property price in Malaysia is very cheap by Singaporean standards, right? So like if we say buy, right, a two-bedroom condo will maybe be 200,000 Sing dollars to 250,000 Sing dollars. A three-bedroom condo will probably be 300,000 Sing dollars or less, plus minus. So and a lot of people who are in a retiree age, typically because they cannot get a loan, so they will buy cash. And this price range, 200,000 to 300,000 Sing dollars, normally is very comfortable for a lot of retirees, because you factor in their savings and their retirement income, and the CPF and the money they make from their Singapore properties, right? Normally they can buy this kind of properties with cash without much issue, lah, right? And just generally what they would do. But of course, if you don't want to buy and you want the flexibility of rental, rental also can. So rental generally in Malaysia is not expensive by Singapore standards. You can rent a 1 bedroom for 2,000 ringgit or less. 2 bedrooms for under 3,000 ringgit, right? 3 bedrooms typically will be around 3,000 ringgit and above, right, per month, right? So it's not expensive. You can factor it. You can always do a rental if you want, right? So how do you maximize the quality of life living in Johor Bahru? What can you do in Johor Bahru, right? Other than we just talk about cost perspective, because cost may be very boring. I save money, but what can I do? What can you do to make life enjoyable and fun? Number one, I think you can buy a car, right? Car in Malaysia is not expensive, right? No COE, freehold, right? Do watch my video, my other video on YouTube also about buying car in Malaysia and the costs and benefits of buying a car. So car is one thing, and with a car you can travel Malaysia, right? Malaysia has lots of domestic tourism options, which I think are great. You can drive up to Malacca, it's only a 3 hour drive. You can drive up to KL. KL is a big cosmopolitan city like Singapore if you want to try something like Singapore in a sense, but not really Singapore. And of course KL, there are lots of good food options and other stuff in KL tourist sites, right? And of course in Malacca, it's a very nice weekend town with historical places to visit. Jonkers Walk is great, right? You can drive to Mersing, visit the islands, right? Malaysia has a very nice range of islands in Johor on the east coast, right? From Pulau Tioman to the Saru Beach, there are a lot of nice places there to enjoy as well. Domestic tourism is very fun. You can visit all the small towns in the semi-rural, semi-urban areas of Johor, right? These are things which I think a lot of you will enjoy. Do try it out, right? This kind of travel in Malaysia if you have a car. And of course, car gives you a lot of convenience even within city itself, right? JB City, to visit friends and other attractions within JB itself. If you don't drive, you can always get the Grab. Grab is plentiful and not expensive in Malaysia, right? It's very cheaper than Singapore for sure, right? Grab in Malaysia. So if you don't drive or driving is too troublesome, use a Grab. Grab works fine. I use Grab in JB many times. It's a great option as well. So go outdoors. That's another thing I would say about Malaysia. One thing, because Malaysia don't have so much high rise, I find it's a lot easier to look at the sky, look at the sun. There are a lot of great what they call panoramic shots in Malaysia outdoors, right? We have a lot of hiking trails, beaches to go to in Malaysia, right? In Johor, go visit outdoors is something that you cannot really get in Singapore anyway, right? And the other thing I would say is go out, get a new hobby, right? Retirement is always fun to do a new hobby that you've not done during your working years. Start a new business if you want to. Go and achieve something that you were not able to do during your retirement. And in Malaysia, one thing is good, it's very forgiving, right? If you start a new business or hobby, it doesn't cost as much as Singapore because you got a lot of space and options in Malaysia to do it, right? Versus Singapore, where it may not be that easy to do, right? And of course, lastly, I would say go and meet new people. You're in a new country, new neighbors. Malaysians are very friendly, generally friendlier than Singaporeans. So go out, say hello to your neighbors, and be friends. And I think come and get back that kampong lifestyle, which maybe sometimes in Singapore not that easy to get, right? So this is what I would say to improve your quality of life in Malaysia. So to summarize, why rent out your HDB? To get a good income from the high rental in Singapore and offset against the low rental or low cost of property in Malaysia, right? So you make this difference and you can stretch your retirement living a lot better, right? And you can stretch your retirement dollar plus your CPF, right? You can live in Malaysia a very, very comfortable life. And when I say live in JB, you still not divorcing your Singapore community, right? You are still nearby. You can always go back to Singapore easily, see your grandchildren, see your children, see your friends, get still participate in most of the social activities that you do in Singapore, right? And yet enjoy a good retirement lifestyle in Malaysia. This is the reason why this concept of rent out your Singapore property to live in Malaysia is very popular. And I hope this video today clarified some of the concerns and how it works and give you the confidence to go and try it out, because it is an option that many people are doing today. Of course, Singapore is an aging nation, right? We have lots of people aging 65 and above, basically retired, right? And I want to share this option with you because I think it's something that's very nice. It's a win-win for both Singapore and Malaysia, and I hope to bring more people to partake in this. So thank you very much. If you enjoyed my video, do like and subscribe to my YouTube. Watch my other YouTube videos, which I cover some of these topics in more detail. And if you're interested to look at property or either buy or rental in Johor, do drop me a message at my details below 81261626 or an email, and I'm happy to chat with you further on how this will work and how to guide you into the process. So thank you very much and bye bye.